Good morning, Dan and Amy. So this was interesting and, boy, sort of close to home for you, Miss Jacobson,
What, Mr. Brock?
as the Puerto Rican that you are.
Oh, yeah.
Puerto Rico, in a non-binding referendum, voted to make Luis Gutierrez their governor if they ever become a state, which is probably what would happen. So
he is from San Sebastian.
they voted for, or you know who should be. Look, if here's
El Gallito.
no here's how I would support Puerto Rican statehood. There's two ways. All right.
We want to take on more debt. Oh, I guess we're already doing that.
There's two ways. Two paths for Puerto Rican statehood from this guy.
Okay.
All right.
This guy?
Yeah, this guy right here.
This guy.
Number one, if Puerto Rico agrees to trade their territory status with Illinois for our statehood so that Illinois can get congressional authorization for a reorganization of our debt like Puerto Rico got. All right. So I'd be open to that. Number two, if they agree to make Daddy Yankee the governor if Puerto Rico becomes a state.
Well, I mean, the turnout was only 23%. 23%.
We gotta queue up a Despacito. Have you heard that song? The new Daddy Yankee song with
with Justin Bieber?
No.
Oh,
just kind of.
No, the Desperate.
You're so.
No, I downloaded it yesterday. We played it all day.
You're so white centric.
No. My Boricua children played the song for me.
It's with a guy named Fonzie. Hey. And Daddy Yankee. It's Despacito.
Yeah, Despacito. Despacito. That's Justin Bieber at the beginning of that. I'm not kidding you. The English. I've got it right here. This is Justin Bieber at the beginning. Wait for it. This song, right? This is Justin Bieber at the beginning.
Well, that's just, he just not get billing. It's Fonzie and Daddy
I know,
Yankee.
but that's Justin Bieber at the beginning.
Why are you so Bieber focused?
Well,
can you give
bring
Daddy
back the
Yankee
Bieber.
some gosh darn credit? It's Daddy Yankee's genius. God, you're so obsessed with
But
Bieber.
anywho, yeah. So and then Puerto
always
Ricans are
Bieber
upset
with you.
because they can only vote in the primary, not in the general election. So they're fighting for that too. If they become a state, then they'll receive that.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then wait. So,
And then what's going to happen?
so I can
They'll
stay.
have more Democratic
If we get
votes.
territory status, then we could stay in Illinois because we get congressional authorization to reorganize our debt, and we wouldn't pay income taxes.
Oh.
That's
You
that's
know
the
what?
way out
I
for
like
Illinois.
the way you think.
All right, let's try and get a serious analysis on this topic, particularly as it pertains to the state of Illinois. As Mike Scott reported this morning, 5 state universities downgraded to junk status, with the state not far behind. We're pleased to be joined by Jacob Huebert. He's a senior attorney at the Liberty Justice Center. Jacob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure, happy to be here.
So one thing that has been raised a number of times over the last couple of years is the possibility of a constitutional convention in Illinois. We've got provisions in the Constitution that just make reform a Sisyphean task, particularly with respect to public sector pensions. And so we need a constitutional convention to rewrite the state constitution. What do you think about that idea?
Well, certainly there are lots of parts of the Illinois Constitution that could use improvement, that could be clarified to make sure that courts apply them the right way. But I'm not sure if a constitutional convention is going to help right now, because that's only useful if you have the right people there who are going to make the right kinds of changes. If you have the wrong people there, of course, they can make our current Constitution with its problems even worse by enshrining, well, any bad thing you could think of into the Constitution, making it the permanent law of Illinois and virtually impossible to get rid of.
Well, and
So
and
it's
just
a risky proposition.
And just to that point, the last constitutional convention, 1970, that's what gave us the state income tax, which we didn't have prior to then.
Oh, that's good.
Well, right, and the quality of people who Illinoisans elect hasn't really gone up a whole lot since then. So if they don't do any better at electing delegates to the Constitutional Convention than they do at electing people to the General Assembly, we might be in big trouble.
But isn't the Illinois Constitution, are we supposed to have a balanced budget? Isn't that part of our Constitution? Because we haven't had one in decades.
You're so naive.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is a balanced budget requirement in there, but they're allowed to borrow money to make the budget balanced. And, of course, that doesn't really help the state's long-term finances at all. And you could have a balanced budget provision with real teeth in it that makes them to actually not spend any more than they take in and doesn't have exceptions. We should have that, but we don't. So that's one of the reforms that we need.
Well, give us some of the other reforms that we need.
Well, of course, you talk about pensions. We have this pension clause, which was intended to just make it so that the General Assembly couldn't just take away everybody's pension benefits when they retire. They're supposed to make it just like a contractual deal like somebody might have with a private employer. But, of course, it hasn't been read that way. It's been read in a totally unreasonable way that gives public sector workers in Illinois an inflexible guarantee that they'll continue to accrue benefits at the same rate that they always have, which is unlike anything that anybody in the private sector or most people elsewhere in the public sector have. And so the only way to get reform in this state is to amend that provision to allow the state to be flexible and make changes to benefits that people earn going forward, so that we don't just have a fiscal and economic disaster, which is what we're going to have in the absence of necessary reforms on pensions. So that's one thing. Another thing, of course, we need are term limits. Voters overwhelmingly want this. They try to put it on the ballot, and they can't because the Illinois Supreme Court keeps it off. Another thing we need is redistricting reform. You could have a system where a computer algorithm just draws the districts, take people out of it entirely. There's no excuse for not doing this, but of course they don't do it. So that's another reform that we need. There are structural things like this that would make reforms of other areas of law more feasible. Because as things are now, the political establishment has just locked things up so that they really can't be voted out of office. They entrench themselves in power. They give economic benefits to their cronies. The Constitution we have was supposed to prevent that sort of thing, but of course it hasn't prevented it at all.
What about workers' comp or tort reform?
Well, I don't know if those things would necessarily be stuff you do through a constitutional amendment. The reforms that we need, though, and if you didn't have the same people holding on to power forever the way they do now because of the structural problems in the Illinois Constitution, then you could get the General Assembly to enact those kinds of reforms. It would be easier for voters to vote in people who could make the kind of changes we need.
Now, the budget impasse that Illinois still currently is facing, what is a remedy for that, short of a constitutionally balanced budget that spends within our limits? Is there any remedy for that in the short term for those social service providers and companies that have bills that have gone unpaid for services or services rendered or goods performed? Is there any pathway you see for a resolution to that prior to the 2018 election?
Not that I can think of. There are certain payments that the state has to make to some people as a result of federal consent decrees. I understand there was recently a federal court order telling them to make payments so that these services could continue to be provided. Of course, that's not the way the state should be funding things, by being ordered to do so by the federal government. It should be responsible for its own affairs and paying its own bills anyway. But unfortunately, that's the situation we're in, where the state isn't in a position to pay everybody, and so there has to be this fighting in federal court and elsewhere for the people to get paid. I don't really see a way out of it in the short term, unfortunately.
All right. He is Jacob Huebert, senior attorney, can't speak this morning, at Liberty Justice Center. Jacob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
And just a quick programming note, our program director, Marcus Brown, has settled the score in regards to the Despacito song.
Yeah.
The original version was Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee.
Thank you.
Bieber heard it and asked if he could remix it, which is what he did, but the original version wasn't Bieber. But you know what? All I care about is Bieber, and that's all my kids care about.
I know, and I understand that Marcus Brown, our program director, is a noted Bieber scholar. But I just wanted to make sure that Daddy Yankee and Fonzie got credit because it's their artistry. Bieber is just like a suckerfish on a shark, as usual.
He's just taking the song to the
Daddy
next level.
Yankee, governor of Puerto Rico, future.
Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
We'll play all of Daddy Yankee's hits at 6:36.